Hey, welcome everybody to Brian's Vinyl Records. I'm Brian, and today I want to talk about albums that I want to see reissued on vinyl so that I can add them to my collection without paying a fortune. So stick around, and after the break we'll be right back with my list of albums that I'd like to see reissued on vinyl. Alright, welcome back everybody. Now, the first album that I want to talk about is by a Seattle grunge band that broke into the scene in the early 90s and took the grunge world by storm. They have currently been reissuing a lot of their catalog on vinyl, including their second album and their 2 EPs, but they for some reason have failed to release their very first album on vinyl again. And that of course is Alice in Chains' Facelift. This album can be found on the internet, but it's usually found in an unofficial release bootleg copy, and it'll cost you around $50 or upwards of $100 to own. That's a little expensive for me, especially for a non-official release. With the current releases that they have put out of Sap, Jar of Flies, Dirt, and more, it'd be nice to see them release this album, their first album, Facelift, on vinyl as well. But not just Facelift, I'd also love to see them reissue Three-Legged Dog. Three-Legged Dog is the album right after the Dirt album. This is one of the final albums with Lane Staley on vocals, and it is a killer album. Unfortunately, it's not easy to get and can cost you over $100 to own on vinyl. Most of the times closer to $200. So I would love to see Alice in Chains put this back out on vinyl so that the fans can finally enjoy Three-Legged Dog on vinyl once again. The next album I want to talk about is from one of my all-time favorite bands, Black Sabbath. Now, Sabbath has reissued a lot of the Ozzy catalog, but the later eras have kind of been shoved aside. That's probably by design. But if I'm Black Sabbath, there's money to be made in the other eras of Black Sabbath. And in particular, I'm talking about the Dio era. Now, I own Heaven and Hell and Mob Rules, but one that is glaringly missing from my catalog is Dehumanizer, the 1990s album that put out with Dio between the Ozzy stints and the Tony Martin stints. This album is fantastic, and I would love to own this on vinyl. Currently, the only Dio song off this album that I have on vinyl is Time Machine, which was also found on the Wayne's World soundtrack. I would love for Black Sabbath to put this out on vinyl again. It was released a few years back, but unfortunately has been hard to come by ever since. So, if you're listening, let's put this back out on vinyl so that we can enjoy it again, Black Sabbath. The next album I want to talk about is Garth Brooks. Now, recently Garth Brooks has started reissuing his albums on vinyl once again. This is exciting. No Fences, The Chase, In Pieces, and Rope in the Wind have already been announced as releasing on vinyl soon. And with the success that he's had of the packages that he's putting out there, it would make sense to start releasing some of the rest of his catalog. And where to start? No better place than with his debut album, self-titled Garth Brooks, featuring the hits If Tomorrow Never Comes and The Dance. Why this was left out of his first package, I'm not quite sure, but I would love to see this soon on vinyl once again. The next album up is from a band that I love and started listening to back at the end of my middle school years and into high school. That's Guns N' Roses. Now, this album is not necessarily the most loved album of the Guns N' Roses catalog. However, I love it, and when I was in a band in high school, we played a few of the songs off this album. That is their cover album, The Spaghetti Incident. This to me is an underrated album. It's the only one to feature Gilby Clarke on guitars, who replaced Izzy Stradlin after Izzy left the band, and it is just amazing and fun to listen to. If you listen to it as a cover album, it's one of the better ones, and I'd love to own this on vinyl. It is available in the used market, but you're going to pay a hefty price for it. So let's reissue this on vinyl, Guns N' Roses, so that we can own this as well. Up next is a band that I also fell in love with in middle school and still to this day play a lot of the songs that they did in my acoustic sets when I play gigs. And that is Hootie and the Blowfish's Cracked Rear View, featuring Hold My Hand, Let Her Cry, Time, and Only Wanna Be With You. This album was a smash hit. It came out again on vinyl several years ago, but unfortunately is very hard to come by again today. So, with the reuniting of Hootie and the Blowfish for a summer tour, let's hope that also means a reissue of this classic on vinyl, because I would love to put this into my catalog. Next up is a soundtrack, and that soundtrack hooked me from the start with the very first single by AC/DC, Big Gun. And I'm talking about the Last Action Hero soundtrack. It may not be the greatest movie in the world, but the soundtrack is chock full of amazing songs. From Alice in Chains to Megadeth to AC/DC and Tesla. And of course, who could forget Def Leppard's smash Two Steps Behind? It's all on this album, and it needs to be reissued on vinyl so that we can enjoy that as a group. So please, let's put Last Action Hero on vinyl once again. Up next is one of my favorite bands of all time, and that's Megadeth. I've been super excited lately because Megadeth has been reissuing a lot of their albums on vinyl once again. And while we're getting great albums reissued on vinyl, there's a few mid-90s albums that are glaringly missing from that list. Now, I'm not talking about Cryptic Writings or Risk. Nope. To me, the album I want to see reissued on vinyl is this awesome limited EP, Hidden Treasures, featuring B-sides and cover songs from soundtracks that they did. It is awesome, fun, and I'd love to own it on vinyl. Up next is one of my all-time favorite bands, and that is Poison. Now, I've already gotten one of my holy grails, but it would be awesome to have this reissued on vinyl so that more people can get it. This album is, to me, the best Poison album that they ever put out. Yes, I know Flesh and Blood is awesome, and so is Open Up and Say Ah and Look What the Cat Dragged In, but Richie Kotzen added an element to that band that they didn't have before, and it was just a well-written, well-executed album. And also, I saw the tour, and so that's probably another reason why this is one of my favorites. So I would love to see Native Tongue by Poison reissued on vinyl again. Even though I've already got my copy, I would for sure go buy another one if they were to put it back out. However, that is not the Poison album I really want to see reissued on vinyl the most. Nope, that goes to Crack a Smile, featuring Blue Saraceno on guitar. This was the follow-up, or to be the follow-up album to Native Tongue, after Richie Kotzen was removed from the band and Blue Saraceno took over. Unfortunately, a series of unfortunate events, including a tragic motorcycle accident with Bret Michaels and other things, led to it being shelved. I luckily owned a bootleg copy of this album in college, and when they finally put it on CD in 2000, I snatched it up right away. However, it's never had a proper vinyl release, likely won't because it doesn't feature CC in the band, but I would love to see Poison put Crack a Smile back out on vinyl because it has some great songs on it. The next artist I want to talk about is a Minnesota native, Prince. It's been awesome to see that the Prince estate is finally putting a bunch of Prince's albums out on vinyl once again. They've limited it though to 1995 and newer, and while that's awesome because we will likely see the release of the Gold Experience, a really good album from Prince, it leaves off two really strong albums that I think need a vinyl reissue. I'm talking about Love Symbol and my personal favorite, Diamonds and Pearls. I would love to have Diamonds and Pearls on vinyl. A couple of songs on here are on the Forever box set, which is awesome, but to get the whole album on vinyl would be even better. So Prince Estate, once you're done putting out these 90s and 2000s eras albums, let's head back to early 90s and put out some of the other good albums that haven't had a vinyl release in many, many years. Up next is one of my other all-time favorite bands, and a band that I played the hell out of back in high school in my local bands, and that is Skid Row. Now, luckily for me, I've already found one of my holy grails, which is the second Skid Row album, Slave to the Grind. I've got this from Korea, imported in, and it is one of my favorites of my collection. However, I would love to have it reissued on vinyl here in the States so that I could get the unedited version of the album. This one has the replacement song for the GTFO song, so it has Beggar's Day on it. I would love to get the unedited version as well, but to get that I have to go to Europe, and I'm not going to spend the money to get a copy from Europe when I already have a perfectly good Korean press, just missing one song. So Skid Row, let's get this out. But I already have this, so the album I really would like you to reissue on vinyl is this one. This is Subhuman Race, which was the follow-up to Slave to the Grind. This album is amazing. It's the last album they did that features Sebastian Bach on vocals, and it has some killer tunes on it. This goes for very high prices online on the pressings that are available. So let's reissue this on vinyl so that we can celebrate a great album and the end of the Bach era with Subhuman Race. The next band I want to talk about is Type O Negative. I first saw these guys open for Motley Crue in 1994 on the Vince Neilist tour with John Corabi on vocals, and they have had my heart ever since. I immediately went out the next day and bought the Bloody Kisses album that they were touring behind, and I was lucky enough to get that on vinyl this last record store day. However, the album that I would like to see next from that band on vinyl is October Rust. This is the follow-up to Bloody Kisses. It's a fantastic album from front to back, and I would love to own this on wax. So Type O Negative, let's get October Rust out on vinyl once again. Up next is one of my top grails, and this one isn't too bad when you find it price-wise. However, finding it in the States is the hard part. You can get it for a decent price, but you're going to overpay on shipping to get it shipped here from overseas. And I'm talking about Van Halen's For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge. For me, this is my favorite Van Halen album, and that's probably because it came out when I was in middle school and it was all over the radio and I knew every song on here. Still today, one of my favorite Van Halen albums, and so sad to see that is yet to be released on vinyl properly in the States again. So Van Halen, I know you're with David Lee Roth, and I know you're releasing a lot of your David Lee Roth era albums again, but let's give Sammy some love and put out the best Sammy album that you did, For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge, for us fans to once again enjoy on vinyl. Up next on the list is Motley Crue. Now, Motley Crue has started putting a lot of their albums on their Motley records out again on vinyl. But there's one album that may not ever see another pressing again, and this depresses me. And this is because this is the only album not to feature Vince Neil on lead vocals. I'm talking about 1994's self-titled Motley Crue album featuring John Corabi on vocals. This is, in my opinion, the best album they ever created, musically, lyrically, and sonically. Now, many would disagree, and they would say Dr. Feelgood or Shout at the Devil or even Too Fast for Love. But for my ears, this is my favorite Motley Crue. And just know that this will never probably get reissued on vinyl is really sad to me, because you're going to pay $200 likely to get this on vinyl currently. And that's highway robbery. So unfortunately, in my eyes, this album will probably never be in my vinyl collection unless I strike it rich somehow. But I would love it if Motley Crue just put their differences down and release this on vinyl so that the fans of the album can finally own it that way. Next up is a band that I loved in middle school and high school. This album I played to death in my car, in my home stereo, in my bedroom, everywhere. This album was one of my all-time favorites, and it was never released on vinyl in the United States. In fact, it only had 2 official pressings, one German and one South Korean. This album is Steel Hearts Tangled in Rains. Now, I'm on the hunt for this album. It's not too expensive considering some of the other albums I've shown today. You could probably get this in a decent shape from overseas for about $40 and then shipping. But the problem is the only pressing that I want is the German pressing, because the German pressing is the complete album. The Korean pressing is missing a few songs off the second side and instead has put a couple live songs on there. That's not what I'm looking for. I want the whole album because this is what I listened to and this is what I grew up with. So I'm looking for the Korean press. It would be nice if Steelheart just saved me some time and reissued this album on vinyl so I could buy it in the United States and pay maybe $30 instead. That would be much preferred. And last but not least is one of my top holy grails. Unfortunately, at the prices that it goes for, I'm likely not to own it anytime soon. But I'm hoping that the Prince of Darkness will see that there's a lot of money to be made and maybe, just maybe, release his epic No More Tears album on vinyl. I, for the life of me, cannot figure out why this has not been put out on vinyl yet. I think if Ozzy were to put this out on vinyl, he would make a killing in album sales. This album is one of the most sought after vinyl at records in all record communities that I belong to, and yet no reissue of this has been announced or even hinted at to this date. Ozzy, please put No More Tears out on vinyl. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of Brian's Vinyl Records. I hope you enjoyed it, and I want to know, what are some of the albums that you hope to see reissued on vinyl that are hard to get, that you would love to have in your collection? You can hit me up on social media, send me an email, briansvinylrecords@gmail.com, or leave a comment on this video. I'd love to hear what are some of the albums that you want reissued, and so you can add them to your collection. I thank you once again for watching, and I hope that you will continue to follow our blog on briansvinylrecords.blogspot.com. Check out the podcast. Just search for Brian's Vinyl Records in your favorite podcast app, or go to Anchor FM/Brian's Vinyl Records to get all the latest podcast episodes available. Or stay tuned to our YouTube page. We're posting podcast episodes as well as video blogs on that. Thanks for your support, and remember, keep spinning.